It's working. Great. So I was thinking, Lynn, if you'd like to just give a bit of information about yourself, and then I'll just give you permission to share your screen. You can make a start. It'd be great to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Lynn Hagan, and I work for Yodel, which is a parcel delivery company in the UK. And I'm going to talk to you tonight a bit more about some of the work that I do there, but I also transitioned into UX. I have my background is like web management. So I was sort of working on websites for a long time, on the content, a bit of coding as well, lots of content management systems. But UX was the thing that really interested me. And so I wanted to try and kind of work in a dedicated UX type role. And it was quite hard to move, I found, from one thing to another, even though I was working in a kind of digital area. But I wasn't really going to talk about that tonight, but I can talk about that if that's more interesting to you guys. So
you might really want to, but what I'm interested, you said it was quite hard. What specific things did you find hard? If you could sort of bring some stuff to your head.
Just getting an opportunity, really. I think being taken seriously as a UX sort of candidate. And so I wasn't coming up in the, in the searches that they do on LinkedIn. Recruiters are looking and they've got their keywords and all of that. Even though I put that into my CV just didn't scream UX enough. Because it just I didn't have the word UX designer as a sort of job title. And I think even, just having that in itself is like made a big difference, but it's kind of like trying to get in there, isn't it? That's the hard bit. So, I mean, what I did was just like try and put a UX slant on every job that I'd ever done. And sort of obviously try and cram my CV and LinkedIn profile with those words. And like all you're probably doing is like building up your portfolio and your case studies and things like that to try and get them taken seriously. But the way that I was lucky to transition in was that the role, they wanted someone who had quite a general background. So the other stuff I knew about was helpful. So the role, although it was called UX designer, they actually wanted someone who knew a lot about other stuff like, web stuff and content and a whole range of different things, analytics. So I was able to kind of say, yeah, I do know those things. So that kind of helped me get in. And then I was taken a bit more seriously as a UX person. So yeah, it's hard, but you're in the right place. You're doing the right things. Like being part of this group is a massive thing in itself. And any of those projects and case studies you've done, they'll speak volumes when you're applying for jobs. It's just getting in front of the right person, isn't it? That's hard. It's getting past that kind of person who's just filtering CVs sometimes is difficult.
I think the guys have also found it quite complicated that when they actually apply for jobs and get accepted to some sort of interview, I know this actually happened to me as well, the person who's interviewing you really hasn't really read your CV, doesn't really know what level you're at. Or they'll sometimes interview you and say, and they'll caveat the interview by saying, in my case, said, just want to let you know, I think you're already too senior for this role, but I just want to sort of see what you're about. So, oh, for fuck's sake. And you spend, several hours rehearsing, I suppose, and revising and researching. And then all of a sudden they say, an interview lasts 11 minutes. And I know some guys have found similar sort of problems that people haven't looked properly into their backgrounds, or indeed probably even understand their roles that they're advertising for. Have you found that at all?
Yeah, I think people they're very surface. Everything's very quick. They're not, especially where you've got a recruiter kind of middle person. They don't really care in a way. They just they have a bunch of names on a list. They call them up. They see which ones they think sound about right. And then unless they're kind of specialist recruiters, obviously I'm not damning every recruiter, but sometimes when you actually get through to the person who's actually going to be the hiring manager, like you'll get a completely different perspective from them. But unfortunately, that is often the way it is, that you are either going through a recruiter or there's someone in HR or whatever it is, and they don't know much about UX. They don't necessarily see that the things that you've got in your background are transferable. They don't always see it. So it's just trying to make it as relevant to them as you can and say the words that they want to hear, I suppose. I mean, you know all that. You'll know all that more than I do because you're trying to do that right now. But yeah. I think making contacts helps, doesn't it? Getting your name out there and speaking on Twitter and LinkedIn and saying stuff and becoming known for things, it all helps. And that was part of the reason I got involved with Ladies at UX. So I met Sue, and she and I, neither of us were doing UX. She had a graphic design type background, and she did a course at Career Foundry, I think she did.
Yeah.
And the two of us set up Ladies UX because we wanted to work in UX. And at the time we set it up, neither of us had a UX role. And then we both sort of managed to get UX roles. And I think having Ladies at UX on our CVs helped with that, because it meant that people took us more seriously. So, getting involved with groups like that helps as well. And so this group that you're in, this is fantastic. You need to give it a cool name and like brand it, and then you'd be
we've called it the Game Changers.
Excellent.
I put together a very clumsy brand that ended up looking more like LG bloody vacuum cleaners, but I'm sure we can work something later down the line. But yeah, we need to get it out more. We really do. I keep meaning to go to the market a bit more with it, but it's just time, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Of course, you're doing this on top of everything else that you're doing. So anyway, thank you for inviting me along tonight. It's great.
No, not at all. It's lovely to have you talking to. I think already some of the stuff you've said resonates strongly with a lot of people. Certainly, some of the conversations we've already had. We'll let you get around to talking about Yodel a second in a minute. But has anyone got any questions in the meantime, based on what Lynn's just said? Because I think it's some valuable stuff there that probably should be extrapolated upon if anyone requires any more information.
Yeah, I do. Hi, Lynn. I think probably some of the other guys might feel the same, but exactly what sort of keywords should we consider using in our CVs? I mean, I've got a bunch of things, like user testing, design thinking, all that kind of stuff, but is there any ones you would personally recommend to include in that?
Well, I'd have to probably think about it a bit, but the ones, like the most obvious ones, like UX, user experience, UX, like UX designer, UX design, I don't know, UX anything. I mean, that was the other thing. Like, I think I had do people search for user experience, or do they search for UX? And if you go and look at the job titles and basically take the job titles and put those words, and so yeah, UX designer is obviously a key one. Maybe user researcher, user research, usability testing, user testing, all of those things, as much of them as you can, really.
Interesting. When I was looking, I was advised to try and post at least twice a week on LinkedIn, even if you're just sharing something. You don't have to write anything about it. But if you have something to say that you think is a little bit more poignant, then of course take your time, write it. But one thing I started doing was just using hashtags, and I started hashtagging the shit out of everything I put out on there. And before you know it, you've got you say hashtag UX, user experience, user research, and people will look for hashtag UX, and all of a sudden people are stumbling over my posts that I've never met before. And it wasn't just viral in terms of person to person to person, it was actually people doing searches. So yeah, if you are going to put anything out, Oliver, I'd advise you to start maybe somebody, Miles, he put his project online, and that was a good comment, and he did that, and people shared it. But I would have probably told him to put a few more hashtags at the bottom of it, because it would have reached so many more people, and would have had a person.
Some people follow hashtags. So I've noticed there's a lot of UX community on Instagram as well as Twitter. And Instagram, they quite often, I guess you'll have seen these. They do those little kind of image slides where you can slide through them, and they've got like their key learnings. And
yes,
I get a lot of inspiration by looking at those. I'm not very good at social media. I'm not the best at self-promotion. But I do, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I'm following things. And I feel like I should be doing more as well, like, for the reasons that Giles has said, if that might get me more of a name for being knowing about certain things. But it takes a lot of confidence, doesn't it? And but I think even just sharing simple things, and sometimes I'm like, oh, will my employer mind if I share this really crap sort of wireframe that I've done? Or, like, I'm never quite sure where I stand with my employer in relation to that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think going online is definitely the thing to do. Because then, if a recruiter is looking you up, or an employer's looking, they will go and look for you, even though, some employers say that they don't do that. Like, they're going to look at least on LinkedIn. So it's worth kind of getting your profile up there as much as you can, and getting recommendations from other people, all of that stuff. I guess all about this stuff on LinkedIn, that you can sort of if people are tagging you with expertise, you can, even if you've only got one recommendation for user experience, you can put that one at the top, and you can say to your mates, go and like recommend me for, or like say that I'm good at user experience. And so it starts to look like you're a user experience person, even if actually you've only got 3 people who said that. It's something, you know, so it's just starting where you can.
I think also thought leadership's a good thing to post as well. So if you're not doing anything to say, but you stumble across an article that you like, that you think defines your philosophy, I often post quite a lot of Simon Sinek stuff, because he really epitomises my outlook on UX and indeed business, I suppose, and probably the way we go about in the world. But I often find that, and I like it. And sometimes I might comment, sometimes I'll just post it. But, you know, just putting stuff out, because people will then go to look at your profile and they'll see what your activity's been. They'll see what shapes you, what drives you, what motivates you, sort of what your value set is. And I think that goes a long way as well. And if you can populate that with the right buzzwords, I think that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, so sorry, Oliver, I don't think I gave you a very good answer to that, but
No, that's fine. No, not at all. I wondered if there was any words I haven't come across yet. But yeah, I know you're right. No, it's the kind of the standard sort of UX, UI, you know, user experience, user centric, that type of stuff. But no, it's fine. Thank you.
If you do a post, you'll get all the prompts at the bottom of it. You know, when you go to a post, it'll prompt you all the. I just bombard those until my feed runs out or whatever. You know? It's always the best thing to do. So Lynn, if you'd like to talk to us a bit about Yodel, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, sure, I would like to do that. Okay, I'm actually a bit of a Zoom novice, but I'm going to just get my presentation open.
Well, there's a big green button saying share screen at the bottom.
Yeah,
it should be really straightforward from there.
That looks like the good one to use. Okay, my computer does not want me to share, but I just need to go into my settings.
No problem.
Okay, it's telling me I might need to quit Zoom. No, hang on, here we go. We're all right.
Dave, you just put Simon Sinek, Sinek, SINEK.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
Brilliant author and presenter. Go and look him on YouTube, and he's all over TEDx, one of the most successful TED Talks of all time.
Wow, okay, brilliant, got it.
Yeah, he's absolutely awesome, and he does.
Yeah, brilliant. I've been a big advocate of his. Been to see him live a couple of times, and since for about the last 10 years, he's fantastic.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Great.
So I wanted to ask you guys if you were more interested in UX or research, or just both, or so if you could either put in the chat or say what you're interested in, that would be great.
Bit of a mixed bag of us, isn't there? So I'm mainly research personally.
Okay.
I do like a bit of UI stuff as well, though.
Okay.
Yeah, generalist.
Okay.
Dave, what are you, Dave? More UI?
I'm probably generalist as well. I love design, I love visuals, but I like people as well. I like stories. So, you know, enticing information from people, forensic, like a UX detective, maybe.
We get a job for that now.
There's a new keyword. Get that on your CV. Okay. Well, I'll so my background, I'm probably better at UX than UI. I'm probably not the best. Don't have a graphic design background. I've got a degree in psychology and a degree in IT. So I'm not the world's best visual designer, but I do have a go. So I am the UX designer and researcher at Yodel. It's a team of 1. And I'm doing both, mainly UI actually, but UX, UI and research. And we don't do as much research as we should. And that's something I'd like to grow in Yodel. I do work with another designer from an agency on a particular project as well. So it's not just me on everything, but that's kind of my starting point. So I will talk about UI, UX and research across this, but yeah. So Yodel is a parcel delivery company in the UK. It delivers 160 million parcels a year, has about 12,000 employees at its busiest time, which is now. So it's gone into this peak early because this year people are shopping a little bit earlier online. Well, they're shopping all year because of COVID. And we've got 7,000 kind of business clients. So they're like retail, or maybe people selling wine online, or Gap or whatever it is. So we've got all kinds of different clients, and we have various like sort centers around the UK that get all our parcels, and then we have drivers and couriers that go out and deliver them, and the drivers are in the vans and the couriers are in their cars. So I work on a range of products. I do work on the consumer facing stuff, so the website and the app, but I have to say I didn't actually design those, so I quite like to redesign them actually, but at the moment I've mainly been working on internal stuff. So we do have a website and an app that people use to track their parcel and find out when it's coming, stuff like that. We have a client facing kind of system for our kind of business clients that they can go in and find out the status of their parcels. And then we have some internal products, and that's mainly what I'm going to be talking about tonight. So we've got an app that is used by our drivers and our couriers to help them plan their day and deliver their parcels. We're now developing a new app, which we've just started developing for the guys that are working in the service centres and the depots, kind of where all the stuff's coming in and they're sorting it and organising it. So it's a lot of logistics and it's a lot of parcels, and it's all about efficiencies for Yodel. If they can deliver take more parcels in and deliver them as quickly as they can and as efficiently as they can sort of take more volume, and then they can make more money as a company. And then the other product that we have is a kind of internal portal type thing, which we're just building up at the moment. So they're the kinds of products that I'm working on. But the main one I'm going to talk about tonight is this app for our couriers and our drivers.
Sounds like there's a real sort of service design mentality that you could really implement quite nicely in Yodel and really fully understand the end-to-end sort of stuff, and draft that out could be quite interesting.
Definitely, because a lot of what they're doing is it's interesting because it's a very physical job. So they're physically handling parcels. And the app they've got is supporting them and doing like very physical processes. So it's not a purely digital experience. It's got to work. There's some things that we've had to put in just to kind of make things stickier so they don't accident. They might be wearing gloves or they might tap on the screen by accident. So, we have to take into account all these things when we're kind of designing the screens and things. But essentially what a driver does, so this is mainly couriers, but so couriers are based all around the country. They can kind of work when they want, but they basically go and they pick up their parcels, and then they have to scan them to say they've got them. And then they might deliver 150 parcels in a day. Some of them lay them out on the ground and then scan them in the order they want to deliver them. Some of them just scan them in any order and then move them around on the screen. And
did you find all this out by interviewing them and speaking?
Yeah, so we did. So I'll kind of talk about that a bit more, but yeah, basically we went out and spoke to different users about how they organized their day, and we sort of categorized them into four main types, but sort of three main ones and then one kind of subtype. And we had to develop an app that would support their different ways of working. So when they load up their parcels, they have this list, and some of them like know their roads really well, and they go, right, I want to deliver that road first, then that road, then that road. And other ones are going, I don't know this area, I've picked up for the first time ever. So there's a kind of tool that lets them optimize their route. So we say this is the suggested route, and some of them love that and some of them hate that. And so you're trying to support these different ways of working, and you've only got this little screen, and then more and more functionality's got layered on. So the way we've delivered this is iteratively. We started with the absolute basics, and then we've layered on as we've gone on. So we're just doing feature release 10 at the moment, which is kind of like, we've developed the bulk of this functionality. And then drivers are different to couriers, and they have to be able to do things like add breaks, say, oh, I don't want to be in this area at this time. Haven't managed to deliver that parcel, I need to take it back, or I don't want to deliver this parcel, or I've run out of time today, so I'm just going to cancel these ones. So it's got to support quite a lot of different things that just happen in the course of a day. So these screens just kind of show roughly that flow of like planning their day, loading their parcels, and then going out and delivering them. They also get like a map view, so they can sort of see the order of their route for the day. And the drivers and the couriers do really like this app, and we've had some really positive feedback from it. Previously, they were using the sort of picture at the very bottom in the middle shows like the old device that they've got. So some of them are still on that, but most of them are now moved over to the new app. But that's what we were basically getting away from, that kind of old design. So my role in this is kind of like doing the research, doing maybe some wireframes or sketches, doing lots and lots of prototypes, getting them in front of the users, and then producing all the kind of final assets really, and handing that off to the developers.
What sort of prototyping did you do? To what level?
So what we tend to do now is that we'll prototype using, we use Adobe XD, and we pretend to prototype quite high fidelity stuff, but we'll prototype every single feature that we put in, because it's sort of like, until you can interact with it, you can't be sure that it's really doing what you need it to do. And sometimes you think it's going to work, but it's I do find that process of doing the prototyping very interesting, because that's when you really know if it's working or not, because suddenly you've got to actually interact with it, and you're like, oh, actually, no, this makes no sense at all. And some of the flows are really like complex. So prototyping is the only way that we can work out if they actually work sometimes. So we start with the designs and the prototypes, and then the kind of stories get done, and then they get developed. So it has led to a really simplified app. It's quicker onboarding for like new drivers that are coming in, and it's made Yodel a lot more efficiency. They're able to deliver a lot more volume. So the business is really delighted with it, and it's great because normally like the business needs are like, you know, not, they don't match the user needs, but because they want the users to be able to work quickly and well, they really care about the usability of it and the kind of user experience. And we've got a really good product manager who wants to make it as absolutely seamless for them as he can. So that really helps. I mean, it's not perfect, of course, nothing ever is. Like there's loads of stuff in it I'm like, oh, I wish I could change that, but it's just not a priority, you know. So yeah, we're just talking a bit there about going out speaking to the users, and here's some of our drivers and couriers here. There's me with my big smiley face when I went out on the road with John, and we went out and delivered parcels for the day, and that was a real eye-opener, because he was very obsessed with finishing his route as quickly as he could, to the point where he wouldn't even put his seatbelt on between stops. So he'd get in and he'd be like, he said we need to start running, and I was like, okay, I'm happy to run. Like, so we were literally running out of the van with the parcel to the door, and he wouldn't wait. If you didn't answer the door, he would not wait. And at one point he shoved the parcel in like this customer's, like they had like a sort of thing at the front of their house to put like gardening stuff in. He shoved it in, and then he legged it, and the woman came out and was going, what, why, where is my parcel? And I was like, oh, it's in there. And I was like running away because I didn't want to. And I was like, oh, okay, this is like an eye opener. So
you,
I mean,
you were just shadowing and taking notes and observing for there, were you?
Yeah, well, yeah, and helping him deliver, and
Right.
using the app. So he was using the old app, and I wanted to understand what that was like and where the pain points were.
Great.
And it was quite glitchy and prone to kind of crashing and really slow, and you could see some pain points immediately. And there's, you know, so there was some obvious things that were so easy to kind of fix, but then there was also some things that actually we've probably made slightly worse in the new world. But yeah, so that was really, really, really helpful. And obviously we've been out to the service centres and we've interviewed these different people about how they work. I've gone to see couriers kind of loading up at the start of the day, gone to see drivers as well, and just, so we've done a lot of kind of talking to people. And then we did develop some personas from that, which I've just kind of put on the right of the screen here. But I have to say, we didn't actually use these as much as I thought. But what they were helpful for was sometimes in just doing a sort of sense check. If we built something, does this work for this person who works like this? Does this work for this person who works in this way? So they were helpful as a kind of tool for people who were trying to get their head around the project, and they were helpful as a sense check. But we didn't use them as much as I kind of expected we would. And then we do lots of kind of little remote tests. So we'll kind of create a little prototype and we'll send it out and ask them to have a look at it and see what they think. We haven't done lots of like live video calls with them, because it's quite hard. They're quite busy people. So we tended to keep the user research quite short and sharp. Like, what is this one thing we want to know? Ask them a few questions. So I would have liked to have done a few more in-depth kind of video calls with them, and I would like to go out. I'm always trying to like speak to drivers. So whenever I get a parcel delivered at the front door, I'm always trying to like nobble the drivers about like their app and how they're finding it and stuff, which obviously they're just not interested in, because they just want to get away as quickly as possible. So there's me running down the street going, Wayne, please answer this question. He's like, leave me alone. So, and then what we would do with every new kind of release is we had a little pilot group, and there was about 10 of them. and we'd send them the version to sort of try it out. And there was a little WhatsApp group, and that they're still active today. So I mean, I get a lot from that, because they're very honest and they complain about what's wrong, and they're quick to say when it's working well, and that's been absolutely brilliant. And they've got quite a good kind of community. They sort of share notes with each other, and you learn a lot about the kind of culture of the organization as well from that. So that's been quite a rich source of kind
of... I hear that. So you get into a constant stream of casual chatter about the app and what's not working.
Yeah, like I'm sure if I looked on my phone now, there'll be some more, like, so a new little release went out today, and they were saying that it was better at this, but it hadn't made any difference to this. And they're always kind of saying, why won't it do this? And I'm like, I have to bite my tongue sometimes, because I'm like, yeah, I've designed a solution for that, but it's not been deemed important enough to go in. So sometimes, you're always up against the business kind of constraints versus what would make the life easier for the user. But that's a really helpful kind of source of information. And there's a Yammer site as well where they post stuff, and that's where you get like people complaining a lot about stuff. And that's really helpful as well, because I think if everyone's complaining about the same thing, you know that there's a problem, don't you? So yeah. So it's not the most rigorous research, but it's immersing ourselves as much as we can in the world of our users, I suppose. And I'm disappointed at the moment, because we're just starting this new app, and I really want to go out to the service center again to see how they work overnight. But because of COVID, we're sort of not doing that at the moment, so it's just going to have to wait. So I've just asked them, can you film someone just doing this? But again, they're so busy at the moment with the volume of parcels that might just have to wait a little bit. So
you say it's not the most rigorous. Are you basically talking about going through multiple processes and analysing data and that sort of stuff? Because I would say that based on who is using this is the best sort of research to do.
Well, I feel like we tend to rush new features without we don't give enough time perhaps before we go into development to checking that this is actually going to work for the user. So we could be checking more things with more people.
I'm with you.
But it's not bad. It just could be better. Like if I was just doing research, I'm sure we would do more, and we do it sort of better, and we do it differently. But it's fitted in around all the other demands of like doing the actual design as well. So
do you have in-house developers, or do you outsource?
Yeah, it's in-house developers. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So here's just showing a little bit of design iteration. So obviously it was that old kind of legacy app that they had, and that's a helpful source, or it was a helpful source of like, well, how do they do this at the moment? And then thinking, this makes no sense. And as you can see visually, it's pretty horrible. So it didn't, it was fairly easy to make something better than that. We did quite a lot of sketching. If it's a brand new feature, I might sketch it out. Depends what it is and how complex it is. So we do some sketching and some wireframes, but more often than not, because the app's now quite mature, we're working straight with assets from our component library and building quite high fidelity designs and getting prototypes together very quickly.
Who's in charge of building up the component library? Was that you as you went along?
Yeah, so on this project, I have worked with another designer from an agency called Yodel, and between us, we sort of we maintain the component library basically. And actually, it was a bit of a mess, but we've sorted it out, and that's made our work so much quicker. I think if it's one designer, you can sort of get away with not doing it so much. But as soon as you've got any more than one designer, you need a decent component library. It's not amazing, but it just makes things so much quicker. We were getting into all issues with version control, and like, because every screen kept changing because it's basically only like 5 screens, but they just change slightly depending on the state of the screen. And so we were getting in a real tangle with, is this the right version? Is this and so the component libraries really kind of help with that.
Great. The left-hand image you've got there, is that some sort of different hardware? Or is that a phone that I'm just not familiar with?
It's like a special handset that we bought in bulk, and that was one of the motivating factors for getting rid of it, because obviously Yodel are buying devices. So what they want to move to is, for couriers, they have to bring their own smartphone, and for drivers, we will supply them, but they could buy like just a smartphone more cheaply rather than these kind of dedicated devices. They've got like a scanning beam and stuff on them. So yeah.
So did you find it was complex to design for different sorts of operating systems, or was it fairly straightforward?
It is difficult. It's really hard because of the sizes mainly. So we use React Native to develop in, and it's okay, but so we do have to support Android and iOS, and we go back as far as like iPhone 5 kind of size, and they've just bought a bunch of Android phones that are quite small for the drivers, which is slightly annoying. So trying to make it work on all those screens is quite challenging. And so what we tend to do is design in the smallest screen so that we know it works on that. But even then, we would have a design and we'd say, yeah, it all looks good, and then the developer would actually develop it, and it wouldn't look the way that we designed it on that screen. And what I sort of realized was that the developers were developing on much bigger handsets because it was nicer for them to look at. Yeah. So they were making it look really great on like an iPhone 10, and then you'd look at the like iPhone 5 and you'd be like, oh my God, like it's just like it doesn't really work. So we've had to try and sort of be a bit more rigorous about making sure it works on those smaller screens.
Good, cool.
Yeah. So the way we were working was that we would shove up either sketches or printouts of screens on the wall, and then we would cover them in Post-its, and the team would work out, these are business analysts mainly, we'd work out what the kind of stories, so they break everything into little stories. We work in an agile way, so we have a bunch of stories that go in, and this was how we would work. And it would also kind of help us check the flow. So we might have a combination of like hastily drawn screens from the existing app, and then we'd be just saying, okay, on this screen it needs to do X, Y, and Z. And that's how we were working before lockdown. So we would have these big sessions of looking at the wall and kind of going through it, and then we would always refer back to the wall and walk through it. And it was really good having it visually there. But since lockdown, we've sort of moved into using Miro. And it's the same kind of thing. We shove some screens in to try and indicate the flow, and then they're doing Post-it notes for all the individual stories that they're writing. And that's just a bit of a mess, as you can see, but like that's just a sort of honest screenshot of our actual work there. So yeah.
Have you found it compared to pre-lockdown to doing something like this in terms of this sort of activity?
Well, initially I really missed the wall, and what I had to do for myself, because I'm working on multiple products, is I still got bits of paper up saying, for this, you're working on this feature list, it's got these features in it, just so at a glance I can remember, because I'm quite often working across feature releases. So I'm like, what's in feature release 7, what's in feature release 8, what's in feature release 9. So I do have some paper up to help me with that. But we've adapted to using Miro quite well, actually. I mean, it's so easy to use, and everyone can comment and sort of add their notes, and you can do it together, and it feels kind of easy to use. And I think we might just carry on doing that because I can't see us all being back in the office all the time. So that's been okay. I think we've adjusted to that. But there was a nice part of having stuff on the wall where it's just right in your face. You can see it all the time, which is quite nice. And I like a Post-it note. Who doesn't like it?
I finally got around to breaking the Post-it notes out at work today, actually. I was quite pleased. So I've been sitting on my computer with my whiteboards for ages. I looked at the window with them all at work. It was quite nice to do that.
Yeah. And so here's just this is a bit of our component library. It's not all of it, but it's just showing, that we have the colors and we have different header elements and icon. The app's got a lot of icons, and then we've got our different buttons, and there are different states, and then just some of the different UI elements. We also have whole screens in there as well, and things that we use often. So yeah, I really love XD, actually. Some of my stuff's in Sketch and some's in XD, but I've really enjoyed working with XD. I haven't worked with Figma, which I believe everyone is saying is really good. But yeah, I do find XD really, really good.
I started working with XD and then moved on to Sketch.
Okay.
Because my old company did. I explored some XD, but XD, this is about 3-4 years ago now, and a lot of the features and stuff were very limited in XD. Sketch kind of was a bit more advanced. Since I joined TalkTalk, they're all using Figma, so I've just now
okay.
Figma now.
Yeah.
we haven't gone as far. We're just trying to adopt it as a tool, but the collaborative nature of it is really, really good. Because, you know, like you have the collaborative nature on Mural, you can see people's indicators and stuff like that. Same principle.
Okay.
With Figma, I can work on like an artboard, and I can see one of the designers working on other areas of the artboard and go and see what they're working on, and it's really quite
okay.
That's
Yeah,
really,
that sounds cool. Yeah, I'd like to have a look at that.
the good thing is if someone's trying to tell you what they're doing, if you click on their cursor, their icon at the top of the page, it tells you they're looking at the page. The screen takes you exactly to where they're working on this massive board. You know, these boards can get so big, can't they? But you sort of click on their initials and then it takes you to exactly where they are. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It is a cool feature, really cool.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I like XD is it's prototyping, that you've got your design, your prototyping in one tool, whereas with Sketch, I find then making a prototype of using like exporting it into InVision, and I know it has got plugins and stuff, but yeah, I just find the prototyping very, very quick in XD. But yeah, I'll have to try Figma next. That'll be nice.
That's what I liked about XD actually, was exactly that, and the fact that you could do stuff offline. You know, on a train journey down to London once, I was able to mock up quite a good prototype, because I didn't need connectivity. Whereas largely with Figma or Sketch going up to InVision, that sort of stuff, you do need connectivity. But no, I might have a look at it again actually. But it's a great app, a great program. I really enjoyed using it.
And these are just some of the sort of designs that kind of ended up being in the app, which you've sort of seen already. But it's just showing kind of how they look, and we've had some great feedback, like I said. So someone said it was so easy a 6-year-old could use it. I thought, well, that might be pushing it a bit, but and then this guy who just emailed us and said, I've worked for all the different parcel companies and this is the best app. So we were like, yeah. So it's nice when you get feedback like that. I mean, there are problems with it. It's not necessarily the most beautiful thing, and there's things that I look at and go, I want to change that right now, but it works, so it's good. And that is all that I've got to show from that particular. So yeah.
That was really interesting. Thank you very much.
Have you guys got questions?
There are a couple of questions in the chat actually, but has anyone got any questions verbally before we delve into the chat?
Just going back one slide, the UI elements, I wasn't quite sure what they were. Your buttons, your icons, your header elements, your UI colors, just the UI elements. What would you say they?
Yeah, I don't think it's a very helpful heading, that. It's just, let me just see if I can open that screen up a bit. So they're just showing fields actually with different states. So UI elements is a bit of a rubbish heading for that. Yeah, so on the left, you've got like input fields, and then like the ability to, if it's in an active state, if there's an error with it, the ability to clear it, that kind of thing. So I have to admit, I don't really use those all that often, but they're kind of there for reference really, as to how they should look.
Do you find the developers rely on those quite a bit, or
no, not really. What they're very heavily reliant on. So we publish all the assets to Zeppelin, and they are reusing stuff. So once something's in, they will reuse it. So things like the active state of the buttons and stuff, didn't really need to worry about too much. But what they do at Yodel, they want an asset for every single state of the screen. So I'll do a version of the screen with an empty input field, a version of the screen with some text input into the field, a version of the screen with the continue button enabled. And then when the testers are testing, they're looking at those designs and they're testing to see if what they're seeing in front of them matches those designs. So what that means is we have the designs aren't throwaway, they're kind of there right until the end of the sort of testing process, which means that they always have to be right. So we spend a lot of time maintaining those assets, if you like, and sort of updating them, making sure they've got the right copy on them and everything. And that's quite time consuming and not necessarily how I'd choose to work. But it's nice that they're taken so seriously that, but yeah, we spend a lot of our time creating assets.
I hope that this isn't too much of a broad question, but you mentioned that if you'd had more time for research or more of an opportunity, you would have done more. What kind of approaches would you have taken? You obviously went out with the delivery driver and did some interviews. What other kind of methods and approaches would you have done?
Well, I would have liked to spend more time trying to get to users who were less sort of motivated. So oftentimes we would be pointed towards people who were used, like who would be able to talk to us and were kind of good at their job. It would have been nice to get to some of the users who perhaps were not so good at their jobs, or where maybe English wasn't their first language, perhaps more of those people, because there's a lot of people whose English isn't their first language in Yodel, and trying to make the app clear to them is, it's an extra challenge. So we'd have liked to have spent more time with those people. And the other thing was that we're very reliant on our local service centre, which is Warrington, but I couldn't tell you for sure if people in other service centres work in exactly the same way. So I would have liked to have gone out to the different places to just sort of check that what we're doing is going to work for them all. I mean, we do have lots of people who know Yodel very well, and they have experience of going around these service centres. So I'm very reliant on them telling me, like, as subject matter experts, how do people do this? But I personally, I don't think Yodel fully understands the value of that kind of that observation, that the stuff that you get when you observe it. And every time we do go out, we get so much out of it. So just doing more of like those face-to-face interviews would have been amazing, especially in like early. So we're doing a new app at the moment, and it's really difficult because I don't understand the processes, and I'd love to go and do some discovery research. I would love if they'd given us time to go and understand how people work before we even just start doing any development, but it's not really worked like that.
Interesting, thank you.
Lacey's got a good question about the whiteboard process. Loved the image, wanted to zoom in and explore it. I'm guessing that's the one with all the post-it notes, Lacey, you're talking to, with the yellow markers at the top. I'll put you down for a yes. So that one with all the post-its, have you got anything?
Was that the Miro one, or the one physically on the wall?
I think she's referring to the physical one.
Okay.
The physical one.
The physical one. Okay. Do you want me to open up again so you can see it?
Have a look at that again, because that was pretty cool. I quite liked that, and I will have a question about that myself as well, actually.
Okay. Just give me 5 hours while I work out how to share the correct screen.
Right.
Maybe if I exit, I can zoom in a bit more.
I think they'll, yeah.
Hang on,
That's it. That's the one I was. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I know that's the wrong thing to do.
I think it was a different one that I was thinking of, actually. Maybe
Was it this one? Or this one?
That's the one I think I was thinking of. There's one
This
here.
one.
This one.
This
That's what I
one.
was thinking of. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if Lacey's thinking of that at all. And that's
Yeah.
I saw it says log on, preloading, loading.
Yeah. Okay.
I like the way you've got the time flow. We've been doing a bit of work.
Yeah.
On that.
Yeah. So this is sort of like the user flow. And this was before we were really looking at designs. Just they were kind of looking at what functionality had to go in to and sort of whereabouts in the flow it was. So we've been told, for example, we needed to do something around the ability to take stops. So you've been given a parcel to deliver, but the user wants to take off and says, don't want to deliver that. So we're like, okay, where on this flow does that go? Okay, it goes around here. So we kind of were able to kind of put things in and then group them in these rough groups. So this flow is kind of the flow of the app, which is where you log in, planning your day, scanning your parcels, scan your parcels complete, and then you're out on the road delivering. So every single thing that we do is falling into these kind of areas. So this is the kind of flow that we've always got in mind. And this was just one way that we had of like trying to say, okay, what do we need it to do in this particular part for this particular feature release? So it's not everything involved in log on. This was probably about feature release 6, maybe, or feature release 5. We're saying for this feature release, what do we need to do in these areas? And then this was helping us just to try and organize our thoughts.
That's interesting you mentioned that, because that's when some of the guys are working on their projects, and we've been trying to demonstrate how to zero in on certain areas, not do the whole project, because it can get massive. So if you zero on certain areas, you can find, I mean, look, you can almost do one of those kind of maps for like 2% of an app, for example, just to make sure you get it working correctly. I'm glad you showed that.
And these little ladybirds are ones that were deemed to be MVP for that feature release, I think. So we just had some ladybird stickers lying around and they got used for that. But yeah.
Great. Brilliant.
Which is the particular method you are using here? Because it kind of, to me, it looks like a bit of an affinity diagram, but also it kind of mixes in with a bit of a user flow, as you said as well.
It's not a kind of purist approach. It was just like,
Okay.
so probably it's more like I don't know what, it's a bit of a mixture really, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's got like the user kind of flow at the top, but then we haven't got like user tasks. We haven't split it down here into different swim lanes. We've just got what are the features and the functionality that we might need to deliver. So it wasn't really written from a user point of view, this stuff. It was written from the BAs trying to understand all the different things they would need to do in order to fulfill some of these kind of features, really. So we kind of shoved them up, grouped them, and then they were like, okay, so this is sort of this kind of stuff. And when they were posted, they were like, oh, actually, I'll need to do this as well. So there is some logic, like the green is questions, the pink are assumptions, and the yellows are supposed to be individual stories. So the idea being that they could then go into Jira or whatever tool is being used and write, there will be a story, it will be called view ETAs and suggested time window. So they're just trying to carve it up, really. So it's not really affinity mapping. It's not really a proper user journey. It's just a bit of a kind of rough and ready, quick first stab at figuring out what the stories are. And more than anything, it's just to give you a sense of how much there is in each thing. So if we're saying, well, we need the ability to configure inputs or whatever it is, okay, there's like 8 post-it notes now, and that's going to take a bit more development time. So they can quite quickly look at this and be like, okay, this is where all the work is here. This looks quite simple. It's a very high level kind of quick kind of tool really that we did. But we don't do that every time. We just did it that one time. I think they do this in a different way now. They do it on a thing called Stories on Board, where they have very high level kind of features like epics really, and then they break it down into kind of high level stories, and then they get broken down again. So it is like layers of abstraction really.
I think that's a very important point you made there about answering your question there, Crystal. Very often, in the industry, you often don't use pure UX practices as you might learn them in any educational environment, namely because you'll be stretched on resource, you might not have the right people on board, everyone's from different departments, got to find out basic things, and normally what you've got to kind of do is just find patterns and groups. And when you start to find the patterns and groups, you can start to navigate your way around the problems and then work out what's required where. And this is an example of that, really, from what it looks like to me. And those sort of the pure. I think I mentioned before, the different interpretations from company to company or even person to person on things like experience mapping or whatever. They're all very, very different. And very often it's just the initial stage like this is just logically trying to sort out, right, what the hell are we dealing with here? And and if you try and be too precise early on, you can get yourself in a real muddle. So it's really, I like the way you've sort of used, I've given some ideas tomorrow when I'm working from home, use the whiteboard and the post-its together. I often get myself trying to be too clever and use one or the other, but it makes it looks a lot more useful doing it that way.
I mean, the thing I like about working with paper and is that kind of it feels rough and ready. So people are very willing to move it around and change it. Whereas as soon as you've got something sort of digital, it feels a bit more like, oh, you can't change it, which is ridiculous, but just that kind of like, it's very rough and ready, but then that's helpful when you're trying to figure stuff out.
And digital, of course, your screen's only so big. You can't take a step back and look at the bigger picture. I find that really hard, just stuck on screens too much.
And this one, although it doesn't look at it's following, there's no headings, like it doesn't have login, loading, blah, 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 but that it is still following that same flow. But the thing about this app is that it's a very rigid flow in terms of like that journey. Like they have to go through a set sort of process to get to the end where they've delivered all their parcels. So it's not like, it's not like a sort of e-commerce journey where there's like maybe a bit of kind of browsing and then kind of you're refining it and then you don't get that type of a kind of what are they doing before they come. This is just like they have to do these things and they always go in the same sequence. I'm not sure that was a very good analogy, but I think you know what I mean.
It's perfect.
Lynn, I've got a question. I think Giles, that you've already pretty much answered it. But when I was doing my course, it was very, very user research heavy, and it was like, this is a clearly defined research process. You start at this point and you end at this point. In your experience, and I guess in reality, I guess it's never really like that, is it? Depending on the time constraints, the scope of the project, the client, you've got to sometimes just get something out the door, I take it. And you're never really just going to go, this is where we start, this is where we're going to end, because you might just start anywhere. Is that what you've had experience of?
Yeah, it does vary a lot, I think, in different places. So it depends on the company. And, I do think that user research in the places that I worked hasn't always been very mature. And they understand that it's not maybe had as much value placed on it as perhaps it could. And oftentimes there may be a market research department and they're like, well, we do research. And you're like, okay, that's a different kind of research. But, sometimes you just say, we need a design, come up with a design. And you're like, okay. And then the design is almost like the tool to help the business understand what they're trying to do and what they think the user wants. So it's almost like a lot of the time when we're designing something to then work out what the questions are, to work out what actually really needs to be built. So a lot of the time the design is the process. But yeah, certainly from mainly where I've worked, we haven't had that proper user research kind of thing. I mean, I worked in the government before this, and it was much more, like the government digital service has a really kind of strong ethos of kind of user research, and it takes it quite seriously. And there was time to do more user research, and I did do like experience mapping, and I did do a lot more of that, trying to understand the users and how they might go through trying to go through a service, if you like. And that was really good. And that's why some of the government stuff is so user friendly, because they've spent the time to understand what users want to know and how they need to kind of approach it. So it does depend.
Mm-hmm. So that'd be designing from a lot of assumptions, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Well, we're getting towards the end of the hour here. Has anyone got any more questions before we allow Lynn to go and I don't know, have a nice cup of bob for whatever you do on the evening, Lynn? I don't know. And,
yeah, I might have a glass of wine to
you.
reward myself for talking to you guys.
Great.
I found it really really helpful. I like that immersion with the drivers getting in on the ground, the field. It's just that must have been really beneficial. Just product. I love the chaos of the boards as well. That chaos becomes a refined app. That's the beauty of it, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.